asking questions. Welcome to the World War II Discussion Forum's Fall Series lecture. I'm Greg McNiff, the founder and executive director of the group. And before I introduce this evening's speaker, I want to briefly cover the usual housekeeping items. First, our speaker has graciously agreed to take questions after his prepared remarks. You have two ways to ask a question. You can either use the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, or you can use the raised hand feature at the bottom of your screen as well. If you use the former, I will read out your question to our speaker. If you choose to use the latter, I'll unmute your line and ask you to ask your question. Regardless of the method, please be respectful in terms of time, content, and tone. Certainly make sure your question or last sentence ends with a question mark. Second, donations are always appreciated but not expected. Please note there is a donate tab on the website. Third, we have a YouTube channel. The link is at the top of the website. We will be recording this talk, and we've been recording all of them for the fall series, and I see they're getting views, which is wonderful. Fourth and finally, you can send any feedback through the website at wwiidf.org. Now to this evening's speaker, and someone who is back for a third time, like our speaker last week, Hal Friedman. I'm thrilled to have David back. As a reminder, David is a retired Navy commander, having received his commission through Penn State Navy ROTC. Having earned his PhD at American University, he served as staff historian at the Naval Historical Foundation for 25 years, has taught at the U.S. Naval Academy and Naval War College, and held the Charles Lindbergh Chair of Aerospace History at the Smithsonian. He has published 5 books with the Naval Institute Press and writes a monthly historical perspective column for Sea Power magazine. He spoke to us about a month or so ago on Witness to Neptune's Inferno, which is based on the diary of Atlanta's Assistant Gunnery Officer Lloyd Mustin. This evening, he's going to speak on that sister book, Witness to Neptune's Inferno, the sister book to Witness to Neptune's Inferno, The Mighty A, the short heroic life of the USS Atlanta, America's first warship commissioned after Pearl Harbor, which offers a comprehensive account of Atlanta's war, covering it from the construction and through her war service. Not surprisingly, the reviews have been great. Shout out to Al Nofi and Nymas, who writes, this book relies primarily on the Atlanta's logs and combat reports, supplemented by material drawn from published and unpublished memoirs. Together, they provide a critical mass of sources to tell the story of the ship and crew beyond that provided by the official sources. The research is highly specialized and very well done, recommended for anyone's top shelf on World War II books. And then Craig Simons, author of Nimitz at War, writes, the microhistory of the birth, life, and death of an American cruiser offers valuable insight into the early years of World War II, including the procedures, processes, and personnel of the Navy, naval life, and naval warfare. The account of its loss in the Naval Battle of Guadalcanal is particularly gripping. Wonderful book, highly recommended. And with that, I will turn it over to David.
Thank you, Greg, for once again having me on, and I look forward to taking questions from the audience once they get through this. So anyway, we're talking about the Mighty A, and I think if you saw my talk last month, this is kind of a little repetitious, but in case you're seeing this for the first time, let me just go through this. This all started these 2 book projects when I did an oral history with Vice Admiral Hank Mustin back in 2001, and he was an admiral who had commanded the Atlantic Fleet or the maritime strategy in the 1980s. Very significant individual, and from a very distinguished naval family. His grandfather had was in Naval Aviator number 11. His father served in World War II and eventually would retire as a vice admiral. And we kind of covered that last month when I talked about Mr. Neptune's Inferno, because that father, Lloyd Mustin, went on to serve on board the USS Atlanta and kept a diary. So at the end of this series of interviews, Vice Admiral Mustin, Hank Mustin, said, "Hey, I got this diary here. Do you think anybody would have an interest in it?" So, well, I said, can I borrow it? So the first step was to go and get the diary typed out so I could read it. Of course, it's script. Nobody writes script anymore. It was quite legible though, and I started looking at some of the entries, and he had this entry on Midway. It could have been Salamis, but it was a Bush League Bush. And then I can't see how this bozo, who was Rear Admiral Raymond Smoot, can fail to be relieved of his command when the story gets out to the Naval Department. So this clearly was a different take on Midway than I think everybody here, viewing this program is used to. So I said, well, this might be worth publishing because he has different views on a lot of activity. So that was the genesis for the it was Mustard's diary. This was going to be one big book talking about this diary, and also the USS Atlanta. I worked on this for about 20 years, and it wound up about 200,000 words. And I took it to Jim Hornfisher, the late great Jim Hornfisher, publishing some of these books. Some of them are on the Chief Naval Operations reading list. And I said, hey, what do you think of this book, Mustard's Diary, the story of the assistant gunnery officer in USS Atlanta? And he went through it and said, there's just too much here. So what am I going to do? Well, in 20, a couple of years ago, I said, okay, I can cut this down into two books, because it really was, Mustard's Diary was really a focus on Mustard's view of, how the war was going. Really didn't have too much on the Atlanta. And then everything else I had done, the interviews, the deck logs, I could make a great ship's bio history, and thus you got these two books, Witness to Neptune's Inferno, which I talked about last month, and then The Mighty A, which we're going to focus on this evening. So why should we care about USS Atlanta? Well, let's jump forward to some current events. We're dealing with China, and China's been parading recently. That this big parade where they brought out all these different missiles. I think here are some hypersonic missiles. They've developed a whole fleet of ballistic missiles, and these are designed to be standoff weapons to keep the U.S. fleet at bay should there be a tiff in the East China Sea, let's say over like Taiwan, or contested waters in the South China Sea. That China wants to have command of those waters, and to deny access. And here you can see the range of these different weapon systems, clearly designed to keep our fleet at bay should happen the East China Sea, or as I said, down the South China Sea. And if you look at this map, I said, it kind of harkens back to the World War II with the Japanese Empire at its peak. Basically Japan had built this ring of bases on these islands, and plus with its carrier fleet, with the idea of keeping the homeland secure from outside threat. So, you can clearly see there's a parallel here between this and this. Now, so you have sea denial through the control of the air, and here you have this, well-known picture of Pearl Harbor, and it's kind of a misnomer that we suddenly discovered that airplanes were a threat at Pearl Harbor. We've known this for quite a while. We just didn't anticipate, should have, a Japanese air attack on the Pacific Fleet on December 7th. But we understood the vulnerability of battleships, and the reason why we understood the vulnerability of battleships was because this guy, Joseph Mason Reeves, was demonstrating it since the 1920s. Here you see a cover of my earlier book on published last year on the USS Langley, America's first aircraft carrier. Reeves is the guy who really pushed the idea of airplanes as offensive. Now, One thing about Reeves, just a tangential note, and you probably come away with it, is that he's also the inventor of the football helmet. He got dinged up so much at the Naval Academy playing football that they basically strapped leather around his head to keep being concussed. So that might be the one thing you remember from this talk. Reeves was the inventor of the football helmet, but he was also innovative. Here you see the Langley. Langley was designed to really carry and operate really no more than a dozen airplanes. Here he is loading, he has a Langley loaded with 42 airplanes, getting ready for a pre-dawn attack on Pearl Harbor in May of 1928. So something one of your speakers who knows a lot about Hal Friedman is these interwar exercises. Here's a book by another Naval War College book by Albert Knopfler, To Train the Fleet for War, and it documents how the Navy uses aircraft carriers, how tactics evolved, like this. Sometimes it was like one or two of these big fleet exercises that were conducted every year. So we're understanding how air power, we're developing it, and we were gaining an appreciation of the challenges involved. And here you see the Utah, which is it's quite remarkable. We had remote control target ships after World War One. The ability for this ship to operate unmanned in a battleship in the 1930s. And this enabled the ship to maneuver and aircraft to drop basically sandbags on the ship to limit damage. And they also would operate the ship with for gunnery practice. We would have gun crews, and here you can see like contemporary version of the ship. Here you see some 1.1 inch gun mount. They called it the Chicago Piano. It was unfortunately it was a gun that jammed a lot. Have to go for a different solution. This was a much better weapon, the 5-inch 38 anti-air surface, and you can operate an anti-air mode. They put these also on the Utah. And when they put these gun crews on the Utah, basically they initially, would have planes go by with these sleeves, and the crews would try to shoot at the sleeves and put holes in the sleeves. The problem is that it was not really a realistic threat. If an enemy's going to attack you, they're not just going to fly by parallel and let you take pot shots at them. They're going to dive on you. They're going to maneuver. And what we had accomplished in the 1930s was, for those pilots, they would go on and after World War II and stay employed. What they would do, we brought in these drone aircraft where it had developed the capability to fly aircraft remote control in the late 1930s, and these airplanes could maneuver and dive on our ships that were trying to shoot at them. And the thing we found out is that we were not doing very well. We had to improve our A game, or else the surface fleet was going to do very badly in combat. And in fact, we sent naval officers on board the British fleet. We had observers, for example, on destroyers off of Dunkirk, and the British destroyers, they suffered damage at the hands of the Luftwaffe. So we needed improvements, and some of the developments came from overseas. There was the 20 millimeter Okerlon, I guess, machine cannon that we're able to purchase from the ability to produce it, the licensing from Switzerland. And then there's the Bofors. It's a Swedish product, 40 millimeter, and these were much actually more effective weapons than the 1.1 inch gun at the Chicago piano. And then the big success to the war was this proximity fuse that we developed for the 5-inch guns. The idea that you could, rather than try and adjust your shell to where you think the enemy aircraft is going to be, you had a shell that would had the ability to detect the aircraft as it passed through within the vicinity and detonate. And this was one of the most kept secrets during the Second World War, almost like the Manhattan Project. In my book about Admiral Holloway, going through his memoir, he referred this as the specials. They would bring these weapons on board. So what was needed was clearly in the late 1930s a recognition that we needed a new type of warship that really focused on anti-aviation. And thus we came up with this design. They had the need to replace the Omaha class cruisers, and the Brits had some objections towards building more heavy cruisers, so we're looking for something within the 5 to 7 ton range. So the General Board, which was kind of like the Navy's think tank at the time, orders to come up with some proposals, and there were I think there was like 9 proposals, of which one of these there was a sketch that featured all 5-inch 38 caliber guns, and the General Board voted for an initial run of 4 of these things, of which it would be coming out as a nearly 7.5 ton light cruiser with a design speed of 32.5 knots, and 26 officers, 523 enlisted. In reality, it's going to be a lot. It's going to birth a lot more. It's going to have, it's going to have some space sharing. It's going to have to go into effect here. And they got the funds appropriated, and the first 2 of the class are going to be 51 and 52, and they're going to be named the Atlanta and the Juneau. And with the completion of the design, President Roosevelt actually took a look at it, and he must have been impressed with slim lines. It's a pretty nice looking ship. Just for some historical perspective, this is going to be the 3rd Atlanta. First one was a Confederate ram that was captured by the North and went into the Union Navy as the USS Atlanta. And then there's the Atlanta of the ABC and D, New Steel Navy of the 1880s, kind of protected cruiser. So, okay, the ship's going to go to Federal Shipbuilding and Dry Dock Company in Kearny, New Jersey. And contracted just over $12 million per ship. And it's on the banks of the beautiful Hackensack, which is where I grew up in Bergen County. I actually went to school at Hackensack High School, so I know the area pretty well. We had the keel laying on April the 22nd, 1940, and here you can see it progresses pretty quickly with photographs there in June and September, and the ship is going to be approaching completion in August of 1941. But there's some trouble in River City, and in the book I talk about the Union struggles at the yard. The shipyard was a subsidiary of U.S. Steel. U.S. Steel did not care for unions. This shipyard was built in World War I, and had limited business in the 1920s. Things were picking up in the 1930s, and finally, the Union Local 16 of the International Union of Marine and Shipbuilding Workers of America, was recognized, and they were working for a closed shop. Basically, if you worked for the Federal Shipbuilding and Dry Dock, they were looking for a situation that you had to work for the union, and it was something that the shipyard was not willing to go in for, and there was actually a ruling from the mediation board of the federal government saying that, yeah, the yard needs to relent on some of these rules. The yard wouldn't do it, so the shipyard workers went on strike on August the 7th, 1941, leaving Atlanta high and dry. Yeah, the launch was scheduled for the August the 9th was canceled. So what's the Navy going to do? Well, the Navy actually goes in and takes over the shipyard, and much to the Navy's surprise, the union workers, who they thought they would have trouble with, welcomed them with Rear Admiral Howard Bowen and his staff with warm reception, waving flags, and they couldn't wait to have the Navy run the shipyard. Now, the Navy didn't recognize the union, but Admiral Bowen actually went down to the different shops, talked with the workers, realized that the federal shipbuilding had an atrocious safety record, and he basically, built the confidence of the workers, and these guys turned to and finished up the Atlanta and the Juneau and all the other projects. They, the Navy had success running the shipyard in the late fall of 1941. Hey, launched on September the 6th, 1941. There's Margaret Mitchell, Gone with the Wind. Now, the city of Atlanta actually wanted Margaret Mitchell to christen the ship with Coca-Cola. Wasn't going to happen, but they did have the reception at the Coca-Cola bottling plant, which was across from the shipyard. So Coca got involved in this, in the event. The wardroom, the ship's under construction, and so is the wardroom. We have, if you take a look at, these individuals here, you see class of, all the senior leadership is Naval Academy. Now, when you get to the bottom, you're going to start seeing some of these ensigns, and they are they're coming through something called the V7 program. They're college, they've had like 3 or 4 years of college, and they're going into like what's called a midshipman school and get what's going to be known as like 90-day wonders. They're going to get their commission that way. Graff is an individual. He is going to go through the school at Northwestern. And the Atlanta really is crewing their ship. They're looking for sailors from Atlanta. So they send Gene Tunney on a recruiting tour down south. He's a champion boxer at the time from Atlanta. And so they get quite a few enlistees from, of the city. But somebody joked that, yeah, there were a lot of us from the South Bronx. So, there was also a lot of, because the ship was built and home ported initially in New York, there were a lot of, sailors from Brooklyn and South Bronx and New York area. Shakedown cruise, October, gets underway, short in and out for the Atlantic. Eventually the captain arrives in December. Taking note of his pedigree there. He was EXO of the Utah. I think that's one of the reasons he was selected to be the CEO of the Atlanta. He understood the anti-air issues that Atlanta was designed to solve. He had a stint at Naval War College just before arriving at the Atlanta. Just as he arrives, that's when the attack on Pearl Harbor happens, and it's kind of interesting. I tell 2 stories here. There's the reaction of Lieutenant Van Austin Perkins, who was with his family up in Connecticut, and he hears his wife screaming, there's some pearl's been attacked on the radio. There's a pearl that's been attacked. And once he gets word, he says, honey, we got to hop in the car. And he goes speeding down the Merritt Parkway, and a cop pulls up alongside and explains that he needs to get to his ship, and Atlanta's still at federal shipbuilding in dry dock. It's not going anywhere, but he's got this police escort, and they roar through Manhattan, and he'd stop at the apartment to, get his stuff and get his sword, and he'd rush over to New Jersey, and is they look at him and they say, well, we're not going anywhere. You can go home. And now, remember that Ensign Bob Graff, the B-7 guy from Northwestern? He picked up the telephone and called the quarterdeck of the ship and says, hey, do you need me to do anything? Us, and the ship said, nope, we're good. So, and then he, Graff, put his phone back down and, went back. And then some of the crew was already in Brooklyn waiting for the ship arrive. And there's, McKinney at the New York Navy Yard receiving barracks. He was issued a gun to guard a subway kiosk. Looking at his diary, his reaction was apparently the Japanese were expected to arrive on the BMT, which was one of the subway lines in New York at the time. The ship was commissioned on Christmas Eve, 1941. There you see Margaret Mitchell in a Red Cross outfit, and it's a big news. This is the first ship that's commissioned in the U.S. Navy post Pearl Harbor, so that there's a lot of publicity. That I have that arrow pointed up there. You can see the Manhattan Bridge, and the reason why I have the arrow pointing at the Manhattan Bridge is that we have a fire control radar that's kludged with the 5-inch 38 gun mounts. And the way they trained was the radar was able to track subways going back and forth across the bridge. So the subways were a very good training tool for the gun crews of the USS Atlanta. Shakedown cruise in February, in March. First they went to Chesapeake Bay, did some gunnery, anti-air, fired at the aircraft carrying those sleeves. And then they went up to Casco Bay in Maine, where they would do, for example, the high-speed runs. And the problem they found with the high-speed runs was that they had a shaft just with 3 propellers. You could see it there, cavitated. The vibrations were just tremendous. So they wound up doing is taking these 2 propellers off and putting 2 props in with 4 blades, smaller blades. They lost like a half knot or so in speed, but the cavitation problem. As far as I'm going to run down the chapters here for a couple of highlights. Route to Hawaii, they go through the Panama Canal. Unfortunately, they clip one of the sides of one passage, and so they dent one of those new propellers, and they got going to the dry dock. Make it out to Hawaii, and they're not there in time to join the Enterprise and Hornet. Enterprise and Hornet were sent down to the Southwest Pacific in case they were needed to conclude the Battle of Coral Sea. Coral Sea ends before they can arrive, so that Enterprise and Hornet are turned around because there's a new crisis that's we're going to talk about here in a second. Atlanta is sent down to escort an ammunition ship and a few other ships carrying supplies, and they cross the date line, the equator. Of course, crossing the equator, you have some ceremonies involved, and most of the crews are they become the polywocks become shellbacks. The ship returns. They meet up with the Enterprise and the Hornet, and here is a diagram that I think I brought out in the last presentation by then Lieutenant Mustin. You see Atlanta up in the van. You see Enterprise and Hornet aft with the 2 oilers. And Mustin points out that and correctly, that this was a really incorrect use of positioning the anti-airship well ahead of the high value targets. He's going to make an argument that the Atlanta needs to be, further closer in. The Battle of Midway, this is it was a quick turnaround, and next thing you know, Hornet and Enterprise fought Task Force 16, and then they're followed by Task Force 17 with the Yorktown. The Atlanta was tasked to provide air coverage for the Hornet. One of the frustrations that again Lieutenant Mustard is he could see the smoke coming up over the horizon on the Hornet, and why was not the Atlanta detached to provide extra air protection? Because the Atlanta was the one ship that really could provide that. Basically, Spruance really didn't appreciate what he had with this basically anti-air gun ship. We'll learn those lessons later. Coming back, they're going to go into Hawaii, spend a month, painting and do a refurbishment. Then they're going to get underway to head down to Guadalcanal during that, they have an AP reporter come aboard, not AP, UPI, Bob Miller, and unfortunately, he's going to suffer, the crossing of the line in a situation where most of the crew are shellback. So as he concludes, after his experience, as I write this, propped up in bed in sick bay, swapped by bandages and insulated by several pillars, I want to pay respects to the surgeon. They said he did a magnificent job pulling me through. Though you may have difficulty recognizing me as a result of his surgery, you should be thankful you have a correspondent able to navigate it, however slow and painful. That's the report to his boss. And I have the whole letter in the book. It's precious. Yes, so Atlanta finally actually fires this gun into anger for the first time in the Battle of the Eastern Solomons at the end of August. During that battle, Atlanta is trying to take out Japanese aircraft, taking that attacked and successfully landed some bombs on the Enterprise. Then there's Atlanta's with the Saratoga in early September, when Saratoga is hit by a torpedo, along with the battleship North Carolina and a destroyer. Eventually, that torpedo is going to claim that destroyer. It's going to eventually sink. This might have been the most successful spread fired by a Japanese submarine during the war, knocking out a carrier, a battleship, and sinking a destroyer. Saratoga is going to have to be sent home for repairs, and basically, we just have like the Wasp and the Hornet remaining in the area. Now, the interesting thing is when an Enterprise and when Saratoga get hit, their air wings are deployed to Guadalcanal, so newly opened Henderson Field. So, American air power remains in the vicinity, and that's going to be the story there is that during the daytime, we have control of the skies around what's called Cactus, Guadalcanal. And it's the problem is that at night the Japanese they're making these runs that was called the slot on the Solomon Islands to resupply their troops, and basically we have this months long struggle between the Japanese at night and the Americans during the daytime. There is some action over the horizon. There is for the most part, Atlanta is attached to support the carriers that are operating south of Guadalcanal. There is in October, Atlanta's going to be married up with the battleship Washington, and they're going to try and do an interdiction of one of these convoys coming down the slot. Unfortunately, the night they picked to do the interdiction was the night the Japanese decided to take the night off, so it wasn't effective. There was a battle of Cape Esperance with Norman Scott in command, and he had some success. And after that battle, he is transferred to the Atlanta. So that Atlanta now becomes a flagship and is assigned to do a bombardment of Guadalcanal in early November. I write about the Marine spotter who comes aboard, and Atlanta basically unloads everything they have in their magazines on the Japanese positions. And that the Marine spotter, he left the ship in tears. He was just so ecstatic about how Atlanta was effective against the Japanese gun emplacemements and troops threatening the Marines ashore. There is an engagement on November 12th, as we had a reinforcement convoy. Japanese came in heavy with land based naval aircraft, Betty bombers. Atlanta gets off some shots, but and survives unscathed. The San Francisco is going to take a little damage, but for the most part, the Japanese air formations are decimated. And then there comes that night, they get word that the Japanese are coming down the slot with 2 battleships and a couple of cruisers. The idea is that they're going to basically level Henderson Field. The Japanese had attempted this before. The idea is that to take Henderson Field out now will allow more substantial Japanese merchant ships to deliver substantial troops and supplies to their garrison on Guadalcanal, and finally drive the Americans off the island. We're facing a situation where we don't have any battleships with us, and we have this 9-ship formation with 4 destroyers in the van and four aft. This is Admiral Dan Callahan is the command of this formation. He's a little senior to Norman Scott, so Scott stays on the Atlanta basically as an observer. Callahan puts his flag on the San Francisco. He used to be the commanding officer to San Francisco. Unfortunately, the Helena is a ship that has really the best radar, and he really should have hindsight, he probably should have moved there for the big picture. What happens is that you have this column formation that just runs into the Japanese oncoming formation. There's a lot of well, could have they done like a crossing on the T, but I think they had done some studies before the war, and they concluded that the only way, if you're going to have a heavy cruiser versus a battleship, the only way you're going to have any success really is to get it real close and just fire away. This is what's going to happen. Well, unfortunately, Atlanta, the lead cruiser, is lit up by a Japanese destroyer, and this was not one of Captain Jenkins's final moments. Lit up by this Japanese destroyer, he orders counter-illuminate. Okay, well, it was either Mustard or his gunnery officer, the senior gunnery officer, fellow by the name of Nicholson, who yelled over this sound-powered phone system, "F that, open fire." And Atlanta's 5-inch batteries slew around and get off rounds before this Japanese destroyer, which had Atlanta dead to rights, could get off a shot. So the lights, the searchlights are quickly illuminated or deadened. This destroyer is heavily damaged, but unfortunately, at night fighting, the Americans had this smokeless gunpowder that ideally during the daytime you would see smoke billowing in the distance. Well, at night, you saw these bright flashes, and it just silhouetted the ship. And in contrast to Japanese at night, they had smoke powder or smoky powder that kind of hid their muzzle flashes. So the Japanese, had an edge on us on night fighting tactics. This is a lesson we would pay dearly for that night. Atlanta, especially, because with Atlanta's guns blazing away, everybody started shooting at the Atlanta. Atlanta also takes two torpedoes. One of them detonates, taking out an engine room. And even the San Francisco fires a couple of rounds, blue on blue. And unfortunately, one of the rounds, I think, takes out the bridge and takes out Scott. Atlanta is left just floats away. It's a wreck. And the fight continues through the rest of the night. So Atlanta's role in the battle ends quite early. In the morning, the ship is still afloat. They're doing damage control, and here you can see, Scott was killed, and you have some of the surviving sailors. What happens is that they have to make a decision on what to do with the ship. Should we try to save the ship, or they looked around and they made a determination that it's just too hard, given that there's a follow-on Japanese attack. They were aware of. So they decided that evening to scuttle the ship on Friday, November 13th, 1942. The interesting thing is, which they were not aware, that one of the other ships in that battle was the Juneau, and Juneau took a torpedo hit and was leading the scene of the battle with the Helena and other surviving ships of the force. Callahan was killed on San Francisco. So the captain of Helena was in command, and that's when Juneau took torpedoes from a Japanese submarine, was just obliterated. They believe that there were no survivors, and the captain of the Helena decided to continue on. They left the five Sullivan brothers would perish. 2 weeks ago, I was at a conference in Buffalo, and the Buffalo hosts the story, the Sullivans, and one of the speakers at the conference was Kelly Sullivan, the granddaughter of one of the Sullivan brothers. So that was an interesting talk that she gave. It was the two ships, the two anti-aircraft ships that were built at Federal Shipbuilding and Dry Dock were both lost on Friday the 13th, 1942. The Atlanta crew, they would exact some revenge in that when they landed ashore at Guadalcanal, they were asked to crew a couple of gun mounts that were on the shore. And lo and behold, those Japanese transports I were talking about, and they made a run at the beaches at the west end of the island. And these Atlantic gun crews, they went to work on it. So there was some revenge extracted. Atlanta is going to be reborn as another light cruiser with heavier guns, 6-inch guns here, during World War II. And eventually there would be a Los Angeles class submarine named commissioned in the 1980s. That ship has since been retired. And I think it was last November, the Secretary of Navy then, Carlos del Toro, named a new Virginia class submarine for Atlanta. So this will be the sixth ship named for Atlanta. Conclusion that the anti-aircraft defenses, overall, will contribute tremendously to attrition of Japanese naval aviation. And in the end, that's what's going to give us the edge, because the Japanese, their training pipeline was very, just it could not put out replacement pilots the way the American training pipeline did as far as training aviators. But yeah, these weapons were not, combined with, fighter aircraft. We still lost, 3 heavy carriers, plus the light carrier Princeton, the Japanese air attack. I don't mention the loss of the Wasp that was lost to a submarine. The others damaged: Enterprise, Saratoga, Franklin, Bunker Hill, and then a lot of other carriers took hits to it. Intrepid, for example. Well, anyway, I mentioned Neptune's Inferno, and I mentioned the Aircraft Carriers of War. Another title that came out earlier this year was a memoir written by Admiral Holloway, and basically he wrote he recorded a memoir. The latter half of that book was published in 2007 as Aircraft Carriers of War, and he passed away in 2019. But I had his the unpublished portion of his memoir talking about his time on destroyers in World War II. He's a great storyteller, but I had to do some heavy lifting as far as making sure that his story matched the decalogue. So I'm very proud of that book, and hopefully, Greg, sometime you'll have me on board to talk about destroyers of war. Right now, I'm looking forward to talking, to answering a few questions from the audience.
Oh, that was great, Dave, as usual. No surprise there. There's already a few in the queue. Let's go to, okay, the first question asks for a clarification. The Saratoga was hit, and by who? This individual, anonymous, was under the impression it was the only ship torpedoed that day, while the Wasp was hit, as well as the North Carolina and O'Bannon.
Right. Yeah, I'm quite sure it was Saratoga and North Carolina and Mantle was hit on that one day, and I think Wasp was a separate day, because I recall from Buston's log that Atlanta was just missed being hit by the wakes of these torpedoes, and I think Buston saw the torpedo hit Saratoga, whereas Wasp, Atlanta was not there. So yeah, I'm pretty sure that it was those three ships that got hit. I'm trying to think which day. I think it was September 1st or 2nd, 1942.
Perfect. Another question, the difference between a heavy cruiser and a battleship?
Yeah, battleship, typically you have heavy armor belts, 16, 14-inch guns. A heavy cruiser, it's going to be smaller, it's going to be a little faster, and it's going to have typically 8-inch guns. So, yeah, I would think tonnage wise, a heavy cruiser, you're probably looking at about 12 to 15,000. Whereas a battleship, you're looking 30 plus.
Perfect. Clarification, was Admiral Scott killed by friendly fire?
It looks that way. Ultimately it's really hard to determine half that bridge was blown off. There were several shell hits that Mustin went around afterwards counting up all the shell holes, and you can see several were 8-inch, and the reason he knew they were San Francisco's was because of the like green dye that was in the thing. But I can't say for sure that it was a shell specifically. Could have been one of the shells off the Japanese battleship. It just decimated. I think they knew they found his ring on the deck, what on the bridge wing that survived. So, fortunately, Captain Jenkins was on the other side of the bridge. Shell hit. So,
Got it. Another one, what does the term 38 refer to on the guns?
yeah, that's a great question. Well, 5-inch 38 caliber. Okay, so what that does is 5-inch is the diameter of the barrel, shell that comes out of the barrel. What you do with 38 is you multiply 38 times 5, and you have the length of the barrel. So if you have, yeah, so the barrel is going to be something like, I don't have my calculator, but about 200 inches long. And then, if you have like a 6-inch 47, well, yeah, multiply 6 inches by 47, and you have the length of the barrel.
Fascinating. Okay, what do you think about the loss of the Atlanta as an anti-aircraft vessel? Was it utilized poorly in this type of direct naval engagement, or were there other options or factors?
Well, you go into battle what you give it, and so, but yeah, I think certainly Mustin and would have loved to have been on board a ship with heavier guns, and looking at Mustin's diary going into Midway, for example, he lamented the fact that we left the battleships behind. So, which in retrospect was the right thing to do, because the battleships would have slowed us down and gobbled out lots of fuel, and we needed every gallon of fuel to get those ships we had out there. So yeah, definitely, it's not lost upon me that we lost the Atlanta. These two anti-air ships were not lost to airplanes. They will one was lost to gunfire, and the other one was lost to a submarine. So yeah, but yeah, that's that happens in the war.
Yeah. Another one to ask about some of the methods they used to train the 700 soldiers. As you said, really had no experience whatsoever in a matter of weeks. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, no, it's just the sailors, they get up at dawn and they do these, and the one chapter I write about all the different drills as far as trying firing the guns. It's kind of like you have to crawl before you walk, and then walk before you run, and that's they just had these drills that they worked them up. Now, in the Holloway book, I talk about how the Navy will take over Bermuda and do all their training there, and how they ran all the ships through like a 5-week training course, where it was like week 1 gunnery, week 2 shore bombardment, week 3 anti-submarine warfare. And the interesting thing about Bermuda is that we needed an opposition submarine. Originally, we had some like World War I boats, our boats, which did not really simulate German submarines. So we actually wound up working when the Italians surrendered. The Italians gave us their submarines operated by Italian crews to train up US Navy ships, from 1943 on. So that was kind of an interesting factoid I learned. So yeah, there was it was like all day, and drill, and in the Mighty Eight, I actually have like 2-page dialogue of what one of these training exercises like, and yeah, it's some of the conversations are kind of humorous. It's like, hey, I got to go to the bathroom. It's like, what, permission, so go ahead. Next.
Oh, I'm sorry. Next question is, in your view, what aspects of the Atlanta story are most under-recognized in standard World War II histories?
Well, yeah, uh, the fact that, of course, the sister ship, because it was such a powerful story, the loss of this ship and almost all the crew and 5 Sullivans, uh, Juneau has been the ship that has been the most commemorated as far as and remembered and rightfully so. You lose most of your crew, but Atlanta, put up a similar fight, and it did suffer as many casualties as the Juneau, but it still you know took some substantial losses and contributed to it prevented that action, prevented the Japanese battleships from shelling Henderson Field, and thus when the Japanese ships or merchant ships tried to make a run, there's a part 2 of the battle that's going to happen 2 nights later, where the South Dakota and the Washington take on another force, and the Washington basically blows the Hiroshima out of the water. And that really is good. That the combination of these 2 surface engagements, collectively known as the Naval Battle of Guadalcanal in mid-November 1942, really is the turning point of the campaign, the struggle for Guadalcanal. So, Atlanta, played an important role in it.
Wonderful. That concludes our lecture for tonight. Thank you to David for another great talk and Q&A. The book is The Mighty A, The Short Heroic Life of the USS Atlanta, America's first warship commissioned after Pearl Harbor. Please join us next Tuesday, October 28th at 8 p.m. when Grant Howard will discuss his book, Romania's Holy War, Soldiers' Motivation in the Holocaust, which addresses the widespread myth that Romania was a reluctant member of the Axis during World War II. Hopefully you can join us. Until then, thank you for joining us this evening. And David, thanks again for coming back, and we hope to have you back again.
Enjoy doing it, Greg.
Take care. Thank you.
Yeah.